She left Hyderabad with one suitcase, a family's prayers stitched into every fold of her sari, and a dream so desperate it made her fearless. Nisha Reddy was 23 years old, the eldest daughter of a widow who cleaned hospital floors for a living, a young woman who had never once in her life been told she was enough. Until she met him. Club Mirage in Abu Dhabi's Al Reem Island. $500 cocktails served on silver trays. Businessmen burning through money the way ordinary people burn through time. And somewhere behind the VIP rope, a young Indian woman polished crystal glasses with hands that trembled, not from nerves, but from the weight of a secret that was about to turn deadly. Nisha was living every overseas worker's dream. Designer clothes she never asked for hanging in her closet. A luxury apartment with a city view. Money sent home to a mother who finally believed her daughter had made it in the golden city of Abu Dhabi. But dreams here carry a price. And hers was about to be collected in blood. What started as a fairy tale romance between a Lebanese nightclub owner and his Indian bartender would end in the velvet shadows of a private lounge. With promises broken and a life extinguished, the lights along the corniche would still glitter. The fountains at the Marina Mall would still dance. But beneath the surface of this perfect city, something dark had been growing in the shadows for years. How does love transform into murder? What happens when saying no becomes a death sentence? And why do the most dangerous predators always wear the most charming masks? Today's case involves international human trafficking investigators, Abu Dhabi police, and a cover-up that reached the highest levels of UAE society. The woman at the center of this tragedy trusted the wrong person with her dreams, her body, and ultimately her life. This is Nisha Reddy's story, and it deserves to be told. Born in 1991 in Hyderabad, India, Nisha entered the world during a time when her family was already on its knees. She was the eldest of 3 children, inheriting responsibilities that would have crushed most adults, let alone a teenager, when her father collapsed and died from an untreated heart condition at the factory where he worked. Nisha was just 15. Her mother, Sudha, cleaned hospital corridors on the night shift, coming home at dawn with swollen ankles and hands roughened from bleach. The money barely covered rent on their 2-room flat in the Malakpet neighborhood. Nisha's childhood was homework by the dim light of a shared bulb, rationing dal so her younger brother and sister could eat their fill, watching them sleep while their mother worked through the night just so they could wake up to another day. Every evening, teenage Nisha would sit on the flat's narrow balcony and watch the glow of the city rising somewhere beyond the rooftops. She had seen the Gulf recruitment advertisements on their neighbor's television. Young women in hospitality uniforms. Gleaming hotel lobbies. Salaries that looked like miracles printed on paper. One day, she would whisper to herself in the dark, "One day I will change this." In 2013, at 22 years old, Nisha applied for a hospitality visa through a recruitment agency that promised legitimate work in Abu Dhabi's booming service industry. Her family borrowed 200,000 rupees for processing fees, medical examinations, plane tickets, and the endless expenses that separated dreamers from the life they were dreaming of. This was not just Nisha's gamble. It was her mother's entire savings. It was her brother's school fees. It was her sister's future. The weight of all of it sat in Nisha's chest the morning her flight took off from Hyderabad. Abu Dhabi hit Nisha like a fever dream. The highways were wider than any road she had ever seen. The buildings rose out of the desert like they were competing with the sky. And the air, even the air felt expensive. But the contract waiting for her was not the one she had been shown. Lower salary. Longer hours. Shared accommodation with 7 other Indian and Filipino workers in a cramped apartment in Musafa. The recruitment agency had taken its cut, and now she was working to pay off the debt of getting here. Her first position was housekeeping at a mid-range hotel near the Abu Dhabi Corniche. 12-hour shifts. Business travelers who spent more on a single dinner than she earned in a week. Her salary barely covered living costs and debt repayments. But she was here. She had crossed the ocean. She was sending something home, even if it was only a little. For 2 years, Nisha cleaned rooms, called her mother on Sunday evenings, and watched the women around her. Some had found better jobs. Some had gone home defeated. But a few had discovered the nightlife industry, a world where a single shift could earn what hotel housekeeping paid in a month. In 2015, a colleague named Deepa recommended a bartending position at an upscale nightclub on Al Reem Island. Club Mirage was everything the hotel was not. The clientele included oil executives, property developers, and the kind of men who could make a single phone call and change someone's life entirely. The initial interview felt professional, legitimate. A real opportunity to use Nisha's fluency in English, her natural warmth, and a beauty that was impossible to overlook. The kind that carried intelligence and dignity inside it, not just on the surface. The salary jump from 2,500 to 8,000 dirhams a month was transformative. For the first time since arriving in Abu Dhabi, Nisha could live like a person instead of merely surviving like a machine. She could send real money home. She could hear her mother's voice on the phone change, the tightness easing, replaced by something that sounded like relief. But in Abu Dhabi's nightlife industry, nothing comes without a price. And some prices are higher than anyone should ever have to pay. Have you ever had someone appear in your life exactly when you needed rescuing? Someone who seemed to have been sent at precisely the right moment? Keep watching, because what Nisha did not realize was that predators study their prey long before they strike. They become exactly what their victims need most. If you want to understand how dangerous people operate, subscribe to Exposed True Crime Stories. Your subscription is not just a click. It motivates us to keep telling the stories that need to be told, to keep shining a light into the darkest corners. We pour everything into this channel and every subscriber tells us it matters. Now let's continue. January 2016 marked the moment everything in Nisha's life shifted, though she would not see it clearly until it was far too late. Ziad Faraoun had been watching her from his first week at Club Mirage. Born in 1970 in Beirut, he had arrived in Abu Dhabi during a period of regional instability with $80,000 and a determination that bordered on obsession. What began with a catering partnership in the industrial district had grown, through connections that never quite held up to scrutiny, into Club Mirage by 2013, a money laundering operation wearing the clothes of Abu Dhabi's most exclusive night spot. On a night when an intoxicated client from Riyadh became aggressive toward Nisha, his hands moving where they should not, Ziad stepped in smoothly, calmly, the way a man does when he has rehearsed exactly this moment. His intervention was not just protection. It was an audition. Carefully staged to position himself as her guardian in a world he had deliberately made dangerous. "You handled yourself with such grace," he told her afterward, while the last guest was escorted to a waiting car outside. "You're going to go far here, Nisha. I can see you're different from the others." To Abu Dhabi's South Asian expatriate community, Ziad was the rare employer who treated his staff like family. He donated to expat relief funds. He helped workers with visa renewals. He was known as the man who looked after his people. What they could not see was that family was simply the most effective cage he had ever designed. The campaign against Nisha's defenses was patient, meticulous, and devastating in its precision. February through April 2016 brought professional warmth expanding into personal territory. Ziad covered her shifts when she was unwell. Small gifts appeared with handwritten notes. Late-night conversations after closing time, where he shared carefully edited stories of Lebanon while listening with what seemed like genuine hunger to her stories about Hyderabad, her mother, her siblings, her father's death. He made her feel seen. Not as a worker. Not as a foreigner. As a woman worth knowing. May 2016 brought her 25th birthday and his first romantic gesture. A private rooftop dinner at Club Mirage. Abu Dhabi skyline spread below them like a spilled jewelry box. Lebanese food prepared from what he called his grandmother's recipes. A playlist that moved between Arabic melodies and Bollywood classics from her childhood. "You have substance," he told her, his voice quiet against the sound of the city. "Every woman who comes here is chasing something easy. You're chasing something real. That's why I can't stop thinking about you." June 2016 brought the manufactured crisis. Nisha's visa developed complications. Problems that Ziad had quietly engineered through his connections inside Abu Dhabi's immigration channels. His solution arrived wrapped in urgency and tenderness. Move her into accommodation he controlled, where he could personally oversee her paperwork. "I can't let anything happen to you now," he said, his hands framing her face. "Not when you've become this important to me." By July, he was weaving their future into everyday conversation. "When we're married. When I bring you to meet my family in Beirut." He always framed it as a matter of timing. "My partners need to see the business fully established first," he explained, showing her photographs of a grand house that may or may not have been his family's. "Then I can bring you home the right way. The way you deserve." Nisha called her mother and described the businessman who wanted to marry her. Sada cried on the phone. Her younger sister started asking about wedding saris. The hope that Nisha had carried alone her whole life had finally been given somewhere to land. By August 2016, the other women at Club Mirage had begun pulling away from Nisha. Conversations stopped when she approached. Invitations stopped coming. The quiet solidarity of women far from home began crumbling around her. Ziad had an explanation ready. "They're jealous of what we have. They want to destroy it because they don't have it themselves. He introduced possessiveness as protection and isolation as intimacy. He began dictating her schedule, monitoring her movements, timing her family calls. "Your mother calls too often," he said with rehearsed sadness. "It distracts you from us." September brought increased control over her finances, her friendships, her time. Sexual demands were framed as proof of love. "If you trust me the way you say you do, you would not hesitate." Notice the pattern. Rescue, romance, isolation, control. This is not love. This is the oldest predator playbook in existence. How many red flags can you count? Let us know in the comments below. But here is what makes this case so heartbreaking. Nisha was not naive. She was not reckless. She was careful and intelligent and strong. And still, she had been targeted by someone who had spent years learning exactly how to dismantle women like her. If this story is teaching you something, please subscribe to Exposed True Crime Stories. It costs you nothing and it means everything to us. It tells us that the stories we work so hard to tell are reaching people who need to hear them. October 2016 brought the moment that shattered every illusion Nisha had built. Fatima, a Moroccan dancer at Club Mirage who had become her closest friend among the women trapped inside the operation, stumbled into the staff bathroom one night with blood at the corner of her mouth and a look in her eyes that Nisha would never forget. A client from Dubai had requested services beyond what Fatima was willing to provide. When she refused, he responded with fists. Ziad's reaction was not outrage. It was not concern. It was cold, businesslike calculation. "These things happen," he told Nisha with the tone of a man discussing traffic. Fatima knew what environment she was in. If she cannot handle difficult clients, perhaps this is not the right place for her. At the hospital, Fatima grabbed Nisha's wrist and held it hard. "He promised me marriage too," she said, her lips barely moving. 2 years ago. Look at me now." In that hospital room, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and the steady sound of monitoring machines, Nisha understood. The wedding her mother was planning would never happen. The children Ziad described existed only to keep her compliant. The house in Beirut was a prop in a script she had been handed without knowing she was reading from it. In November 2016, another woman, a Vietnamese hostess named Lan, who wore long sleeves to hide what clients with particular appetites had done to her arms, revealed that a hidden network existed. Filipino, Indian, and Ethiopian domestic workers had quietly built an underground system for helping trapped women escape. At the center of this network was Sister Agnes, a Catholic nun who ran an unlicensed safe house for escaped workers operating out of a church hall in the Abu Dhabi suburb of Khalifa City. For the first time in months, Nisha did not feel alone. December 2016 began her documentation. Using a phone Sister Agnes had provided, Nisha recorded Ziad's instructions to the women. She photographed payment records. She collected evidence with the cold patience of someone who had finally decided to fight back. But her mother's excitement on their video calls, the wedding plans, the talk of visiting Abu Dhabi to meet Ziad, became a weight she could barely breathe under. How could she destroy her family's only hope to save her own life? January 2017 brought Ziad's suspicion. He noticed Nisha's growing distance, her decreased compliance, the way she no longer flinched when he raised his voice. He increased his monitoring, checking her phone, following her on days off, interrogating other staff members. He cut her allowance and reminded her, with calculated softness, that everything she had, her apartment, her visa, the money going home to her mother, existed because of him. "I'm starting to wonder if I misjudged you," he said one evening. "Maybe you're just like all the others after all." February 2017 brought the ultimatum. A Russian businessman had made a specific request for Nisha's company for a weekend, and Ziad presented it with a smile. "One arrangement like this covers your family's rent for 2 years. Don't you want that for them?" When Nisha refused, the first physical violence arrived, a slap that rang through their apartment. Then the immediate apology that always follows the first blow. "I'm sorry. You make me lose my mind sometimes. You know I love you more than anything." March 2017. Sister Agnes presented the escape plan. A legitimate employment visa had been arranged through a verified hospitality employer in Sharjah. Nisha needed only to retrieve her passport from the safe in Ziad's office and leave within 48 hours. Transportation, temporary housing, and legal support were coordinated and ready. The plan was exactly what it needed to be. Except for one thing they could not predict: Ziad's increasingly unstable state of mind. April 14, 2017. Nisha made the decision. She wrote a letter to her mother explaining the truth, all of it from the beginning. She recorded a video testimony about the trafficking operation for law enforcement, and she whispered to her reflection in the bathroom mirror of the apartment she had never truly been free inside. Today I choose myself. The night of August 8, 2017, arrived like an appointment that had been written in ink a long time ago. Club Mirage's crowded Friday night provided cover. Nisha requested a private meeting with Ziad after closing. A small audio recorder sat in her purse. Sister Agnes was expecting a check-in call before dawn. The VIP lounge at 3:30 in the morning. Cleaning staff had finished and left. Security cameras were running on their automated 15-minute loop. The velvet shadows that had once felt glamorous now pressed in from every direction. Nisha had prepared what she wanted to say. She had rehearsed it. She delivered it clearly. I'm ending this. I'm leaving Abu Dhabi. I'm going home to my mother and I'm going to tell her the truth. Ziad's first reaction was disbelief. After everything I've given you? After everything we've shared? Her voice was steady in a way it had never been with him before. You didn't give me anything. You took everything and called it a gift. What followed was the pattern of every controlling person whose control is suddenly removed. First came denial. Then bargaining, promises of marriage, flights to Beirut, a wedding ceremony, anything. Then came the financial threats. Your mother's rent. Your brother's school. Your visa. All of it disappears the moment you walk out. Nisha's reply came from somewhere deeper than fear. I would rather my family be poor with their heads up than rich on my suffering. The rage that broke through Ziad in the moments that followed had been building for years. The pressure of a criminal enterprise beginning to fracture. Several women who had already escaped. Business partners threatening to withdraw. And now the woman he had controlled most completely was walking away, and there was nothing left in his arsenal that could stop her. The struggle that followed was brief and desperate. It was not planned. It was the final implosion of a man who had built his entire identity around the power to own people, meeting a woman who had finally decided she could not be owned. Nisha's last recorded words, captured on the audio device in her purse, were quiet and certain. You never owned me, Ziad. Not for a single day. The cover-up began within the hour. Panicked calls to contacts who had helped Ziad dispose of problems before. Nisha's body was transported to an industrial district near Abu Dhabi's Musafah warehousing zone and buried at a construction site scheduled to be paved over within days. A forged resignation letter was placed in her employee file. A fabricated final payment was processed. Staff were told she had returned to India for a family emergency. Sister Agnes's unanswered phone became the first alarm. When the money transfers to Nisha's family stopped without explanation, her mother Sudha began sending voice messages across every platform she could find. The desperation in a mother's voice, shared by Nisha's brother across social media, spread through the Indian overseas worker community with the speed of grief. Within weeks, it had reached hundreds of thousands of people. August 21, 2017. Sister Agnes arrived at Abu Dhabi police headquarters with documentation and a refusal to be dismissed. Initial responses were bureaucratic and dismissive. But the Filipino, Indian, and Ethiopian consulates recognized the pattern and applied pressure that the Abu Dhabi authorities could no longer absorb without international consequence. September 2017. Construction workers at the Musafah site uncovered human remains. DNA-matched samples from Nisha's belongings in the apartment Ziad had provided. Cause of death: manual strangulation. The timeline matched the night she was last seen. The audio recording recovered from her purse changed everything. Digital forensics revealed cloud backups of Nisha's documentation, Ziad's instructions to the women, the payment records, the evidence she had gathered with such quiet courage over months. The financial trail connecting Club Mirage to international money laundering networks opened an investigation far larger than a single murder. October 2017. The full scope of the trafficking operation came into view. 17 women from India, the Philippines, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Morocco were identified as victims of the same scheme. Each had been recruited through manufactured romantic relationships, promised marriage and security, then gradually coerced into providing paid sexual services. Each had been isolated, threatened, and exploited by the same man in the same system. November 2017. Ziad Faraoun was arrested at Abu Dhabi International Airport attempting to board a flight with a Lebanese passport issued under a false name, 2 suitcases of currency and cryptocurrency storage devices. Interpol's red notice had been waiting for him. The trial began in early 2018. Testimony from 16 surviving victims was devastating in its consistency and detail. Ziad's defense team argued that his relationship with Nisha had been consensual and that her death was the accidental outcome of an emotional dispute. The prosecution disassembled this narrative piece by piece with evidence of years of systematic control, financial coercion, and premeditated exploitation. March 2018. Guilty on all charges. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Civil penalties exceeding 60 million dirhams and victim compensation drawn from seized assets. A deportation order that was, given the sentence, largely symbolic. The UAE government introduced stricter licensing requirements for nightlife establishments, enhanced labor protections for hospitality workers, and provided official recognition and operational funding for safe house programs run by religious and humanitarian organizations across the country. Nisha's mother Sudha used the family's victim compensation to establish a small scholarship in Hyderabad, supporting young Indian women pursuing legitimate overseas employment opportunities. She named it after her daughter. On the day it was announced, she said, "Nisha went there to save us. In the end, she saved others we will never even meet." Nisha's courage in her final hours saved 16 other women from the same fate. Her death exposed a network that had operated for years behind the glittering surface of one of the wealthiest cities on earth, protected by money and silence and the city's reputation for discretion. But the story does not end here. Because men like Ziad Faraoun exist in every city, in every industry, in every community, waiting for the next woman who needs rescuing badly enough to trust a stranger with her dreams. Subscribe to Exposed True Crime Stories. Not because we ask you to, because doing so helps us keep telling stories like Nisha's. It takes an enormous amount of work to research, write, and produce content that treats victims with the dignity they deserve. Your subscription is what makes that possible. It tells us that this work matters. And in a world that moves very fast and forgets very easily, it is how we make sure stories like Nisha's are never forgotten. Share this with someone who needs to see these warning signs. Because justice for Nisha came too late for Nisha. But her story can still save someone else. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The first time. Exposed True Crime Stories. Because the truth deserves a voice.